Hello everyone, this is Family IT Guy again. So today we are looking at the iPhone 3G. This one I actually got off of eBay for about $10. It's actually the original phone that I got back in like 2009. This is model 1241. Originally released back in July of 2008, nearly 11 years ago. Funny thing, this thing actually sold about 20 million units. It was less expensive than the original, and this thing sold like hotcakes. I mean, obviously, I managed to afford it because the original iPhone was actually around $500 to $600, I believe. I managed to bag one for about $200 with AT&T. I would say that this phone, I mean, obviously I was completely new to it. Um, the whole idea of a smartphone, I was still using flip phones, and when I got this thing, it was just, completely mind blowing. The idea that you could have a whole uh, web experience, desktop web experience within this small form factor was just, blew my mind. And one of the things that even the name of it is the iPhone 3G. Technically, second generation. Even in the firmware name, it's, I believe, iPhone 2. But it's called the iPhone 3G. And then the third generation, I guess, would technically be the iPhone 3GS. And then they picked up back with the iPhone 4. Right. So, yeah, going back to it though, this thing was available in 8 or 16 gigs. It was an ARM-based Samsung processor, and it only had 128 megabytes of RAM. Uh, Another interesting thing about this phone actually was to help boost the radio frequency performance. This whole back panel is actually polycarbonate, and so it, feels plastic. It is basically, and 3G. That was kind of the whole. It's baked into the name. It's the phone's identity. Really emphasis on the mobile, speed. Browsing the webs, downloading apps, things like that, getting onto YouTube and whatnot, and iTunes. Downloading things over the air. So it was critical that they had a fast phone for the network it was on. Of course, it was AT&T, but they claimed that it was 36% faster than any other 3G phones out there. Which, by the way, that was around 3.5 megabits per second. So, by today's standards, it's well. Actually, with AT&T, I'm still with AT&T. It's not much faster. I think I recently did a speed test at AT&T one time, and I was getting 1 meg down. But anyways, enough of that. I'm actually a pretty happy AT&T customer, so I don't have that many complaints. But anyways, so I remember actually watching the release of this phone with Steve Jobs up there, talking about how awesome the download speeds were. And so they had this side-by-side comparison where they had an Edge phone, downloading a National Geographic website, and then they had the same phone using the new 3G network. And, of course, it's a graphic-heavy website. What was funny about it, though, was that it took around 20 seconds for it to actually load the 3G content or over the 3G network. It still took over 20 seconds for that to complete, and then I believe the Edge network took something like 50 to a minute for it to completely download the web page. That was just excruciating to watch. I mean, obviously it's Steve Jobs up there, presenting this thing, and it was just a really long point to make. I thought it was kind of awkward. Using this phone, funny enough, this is 4.2.1. This originally came with iOS 2. I will admit that it has not aged well in terms of performance. 4.2 is just really rough on this. I mean, it is very slow. Obviously, modern. I can go to any website, like, let me try Reddit again. And when you load it, it just does not do very well. Let me see. Can I verify it? Continue. That's just an HTTPS, probably because the clock's wrong or something. Doesn't load any of the assets. Yeah. But anyways, so like I said, this device was actually pretty. I would say it was one of the best decisions that Apple could have made by lowering the cost down. It opened it up to so many people, because the first iPhone was kind of like a status symbol. My boss actually had one, and he had the 4 gig version, I believe. And we literally sat around and just oohed and awed over this thing. And then later, whenever this came out, more people started getting iPhones. It became more commonplace, and people, it just kind of exploded. And it was kind of funny because, like, you kind of felt like part of a club. And I'll admit that you felt special. And I was actually kind of suddenly a big iPhone, Apple fanboy a bit. I definitely drank that Kool-Aid. I felt like Apple couldn't do anything wrong. Because, I was using their device. It was, worked exactly the way that you'd expect it to. The ecosystem was fantastic. I mean, they had the App Store. iTunes was great. I was downloading so many songs and movies. And it, like I said, I absolutely loved it. And I had all the way up to I want to say a 4. I think I had a 4S. That was my last phone. So I got this thing cracked open. So I'm just gonna carefully take off these ribbon cables. Fortunately, they have them all nicely labeled. And you have the one here actually just pops off pretty easily, and then you have this other smaller ribbon cable that you have to kind of, I'm not sure if you can see that. It's the one with the number 3 on it. You have to just kind of carefully pull it out because you don't want to accidentally tear it. And the great thing about these old phones was that you can actually take the screen off completely and replace the digitizer if you let your kids play with it and accidentally broke it. There we go. Gotta get on the side there. And then you have the home button down here. And then you have your earpiece I don't believe this actually had, I don't think it had a camera yet. I don't think so. No, it didn't have a front-facing camera. Not in those days. If anything, it has, at the very least, some sort of face detection so they know just when this thing's up against your face. But I could be wrong. So that's, I don't repair these on every day, so let's see. All lined up nice and pretty. Alright, let's keep going here. And then we have the main board, the main logic board. This is the SIM card reader. This is the camera. This is the power button. Let's just start tearing into this thing. There we go. Camera's still on. This is the SIM card. I mean, it's actually pretty big. You just kind of insert this thing. I mean, compared to the size of a Nano, I mean, things huge back in those days. Okay, what else we got here? This is just a heat shield that goes over all of the chipsets. There is that Samsung ARM processor underneath here, and then 128 megabytes of RAM, which isn't a whole lot. And then it's got a whole bunch of different sensors like an accelerometer, GPS, obviously the 3G stuff. That's all in there. And yeah, it's nothing really fancy besides some, this looks like just some sort of heat. It just looks like some sort of heat dissipation material. Pretty neat. And then there's the camera just attached via ribbon cable. And, neat. Next up, okay, so now we got this bottom part. Let's pull this out. And when you look closely at this, this looks like a microphone, and then this one looks like a speaker because it has an opening for it. And then it's just rather large, so I imagine maybe it's just kind of cavernous for, sound quality, whatever. Okay. Next up, you obviously have the battery, and then you have this huge honking DC motor here with a massive weight on it, and that actually produces the vibration effect for the phone. It is just stunning to me how big that is. And you can actually see that is plastic, polycarbonate specifically. And then, like I was showing before, everything's kind of hooked up to this aluminum frame. I'm assuming that it acts kind of like an antenna. Interesting to note, when the first iPhone came out, it was a metal body with plastic buttons, and when the 3G came out, it was a plastic body with metal buttons. Just, I know that's kind of funny in a nerdy kind of way. That is the iPhone 3G. Thanks for watching.